Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Tempe City Council work study session. Item number one is call to order. Council meetings can be watched in real time via Cox Cable Channel 11 at tempe.gov/tempe11. Members of the public may also attend the meeting virtually through Microsoft Teams. Guidelines for conduct at City Council meetings are on the table near the entrance for those in attendance at tonight's meeting. We will now play a video with the proper protocol for ensuring the appropriate conduct at City Council meetings.
The City of Tempe welcomes public comment at this time. Disruptive behavior will not be allowed. Continued disruptive behavior will lead to removal from the council chambers. We need to be able to hear everyone in the room. Behavior that disrupts, disturbs, or otherwise impedes the orderly conduct of any city council meeting is not helpful and is not permitted. This includes behavior both inside and outside of the council chambers. Should individuals inside the council chambers become disruptive so that city business is not able to be conducted, the mayor will first ask that the individuals allow city business to be completed. There will be time for public comment during the call to the audience portion of the meeting. If no cooperation, the mayor will issue a verbal warning and let them know that the continued disruptive behavior will lead to removal from the council chambers. If there is still no cooperation, the mayor will issue a second verbal warning and let them know that the continued disruptive behavior will lead to removal from the council chambers. If there is no cooperation after asking and 2 verbal warnings, then the mayor will ask security officers to remove only those individuals who are causing the disruption. Security personnel should not engage in any way, but only escort them from the council chambers. If individuals refuse to leave, security personnel shall warn them that they are trespassing and that the next step will be arrest by a Tempe police officer. Tempe officers may have to arrest if individuals refuse to leave. Charges for trespass and disorderly conduct may apply, as well as other charges. Should anyone be asked to be removed, the mayor will recess the meeting.
Thank you very much. Next up, item number 2, call to the audience. The City Council welcomes public comment at this time for the issue review session and committee of the whole items on this work study session agenda. There is a 3-minute time limit per speaker. Madam Clerk, I know we have one speaker on virtually.
You may unmute your mic now.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes. Hi, please state your name and place of residence. You have 3 minutes.
My name is David Sokolowski. I live in Tempe. The city wants to spend $220 million on pavement, and in my opinion, this will be a waste of money. I think heat waves and EVs will destroy the streets. One solution to mitigate urban heat is to copy cities like Montevideo and Paris by planting trees street by street until the entire city is covered. I estimate Tempe should plant at least 300,000 trees to close our carbon neutrality gap. There are other things you can do, like ask residents to purchase the smallest vehicles, but that won't be effective in the next 5 years. Multimodal transportation was the highest category on the budget survey with 88 points. Every year, it's the top priority for our city. We have a goal to achieve an 80% transit satisfaction rating by 2024, and it's currently 57%. Why isn't Tempe achieving the desired outcome? Public safety got a total of 240 points. The city needs a more holistic approach to public safety. Paving the streets to improve travel speeds could make accidents more likely. We live in a city where cars fly off the streets, and I'm not just talking about the most recent incident. I watched a car crash into a house on McKellips. I was nearly hit when a car crashed at Broadmoor Elementary, and Penny Brown was killed sitting at a bus stop. This is not acceptable. The housing crisis got a total of 245 points. Tempe doesn't have an actual affordable housing plan. It doesn't matter how much Phoenix spent. What really matters is how much Tempe needs to spend to achieve the desired outcome. It's more than 30 million, and this bond could easily be 100 million. Tempe needs to combine its resources, including the bond, the general fund, Hometown for All, Maricopa County, and the redevelopment fund. Tempe needs to build 100 low-income units every 30 days, indefinitely. Tempe needs a comprehensive plan and the funding to implement it. This is the end of March, so Tempe is behind 300 units this year. Delaying the inevitable will only make it more difficult and expensive in the future. At this rate, Tempe will need to build 200 low-income units every 30 days. You know what it's like when cities fail to solve the housing crisis. You had to clean up the river. You saw what happened when Phoenix had to clean up the zone. Those are big red flags that we're on our way to becoming a truly dystopian society. Failure is not an option, and this is the time for emergency action. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, are there any other speaker cards this evening?
No additional ones?
Okay, sounds good. Thank you. All right. Is there anyone else in the audience wishing to address the council on any of these agenda items? If so, please come forward and state your name and city of residence for the record on any agenda item. All right, seeing none, I will close that portion of the agenda and move to item number 3A, which is initial recommended 5-year capital improvements program and acceleration strategies. And I see Tom Dunsey and Lisette Camacho coming up.
Good afternoon, Mayor, members of the council. My name is Tom Dunsing. I'm the Chief Deputy City Manager, and I'm joined this afternoon by Lisette Camacho, our Financial Service Director. And in just a moment, when we get through a little bit of the presentation, we'll be joined by Wydell Holmes, the Director of Strategic Management and Innovation Office. So if I could, I'd like to set the framework for the discussion this afternoon. Today's is the first look at the recommended 5-year capital improvement program, or CIP, and also we'll talk about the acceleration strategies that we've talked about over the past several months. So really, budgeting is probably one of the most difficult, but one of the most important jobs that a council has. The reason we're here today, Monday, March 25th, is our charter requires that we get before council at least 90 days before the beginning of the fiscal year to present the city manager's recommended 5-year CIP, and that's why we're here today. There's a tremendous amount of information in your packets, as you know. And the main focus on today's presentation when we talk about the CIP will be around our largest funding source, and that's general obligation bonds. And as council understands, we've had multiple discussions about our GO bond program the past few months. We'll try to tie it together as best we can today. Some of the highlights that we're going to talk about is we took a little bit different approach this year in developing the CIP. Departments were provided targets for their GO bond and cash-funded projects. And then based on these targets, they were able to develop the requests that you see today. Excuse me. The natural evolution of a CIP, it's a 5-year process. And so what we have each year is you basically lose a year at the beginning and you add on a year at end. It's an iterative process. So a CIP will change based on council's change priorities, but the larger, more complex projects that council's used to seeing every year, those stay the same and they pretty much just evolve as construction costs go up or down, as council priorities change. But for the most part, a CIP really is kind of an iterative document that kind of stays the same. So despite the fact that this is the initial look at the recommended CIP, the projects in here have been discussed many times. Council's very familiar with the projects. Some of the ones that we've highlighted through the past few months we'll hit today and hopefully tie everything together. We are not making funding decisions tonight. This is really the first look at it and to kind of get the council's feedback on, are we hitting the priorities? Do you have questions? Departments are here tonight to be able to answer any questions that the council may have. A couple other things, we're going to hit on a couple of the areas that were discussed over the past few months. In particular, the Affordable Housing Enhancement Program. We'll hit on that a little bit. As Wydell will talk about, PQI acceleration, we've talked about that at several council work study sessions. We are including quite a bit of additional funding for our historic properties. In fact, $12.3 million, which is quite an increase over the prior year. That's a result of council priorities. Council told us to go back and look to see if we can increase funding, and we brought back a CIP that has done that. We won't talk a lot about it, but projects near and dear to this community, pickleball courts. There is a project in the parks program for increased number of pickleball courts. Mr. Hayton is here to answer any questions on that that you may have. It does include maintaining the general fund funding that we've identified for a few of the very important projects. A couple of those are the police station in North Tempe, fire station, I believe it's Fire Station 3 that we've identified cash funding. So there are a few projects that we were able to actually address increased costs through some of the prior years where we've kind of outperformed our general fund. We're able to utilize some of that cash for our projects. I don't anticipate that's going to be the case once we get going in the year and we realize the loss of residential rental. But it was a nice thing to be able to do in order to kind of hedge inflation. Of course, we've got our water and wastewater. It's a sizable program, and Ms. Camacho will go over the relative size of our total CIP. Not sexy, but we have to maintain our water and sewer infrastructure. It's critical for any utility to maintain water and sewer. So it is a sizable CIP. The document that you have, again, it's a very, very large document. It contains a summary of the total CIP that we're going to talk about, and we'll hit at a high level. There is an interactive prioritization. We refer to it lovingly as the bubble chart, where you can kind of see where the focus of our CIP lands. And typically, the most important and responsible things that a government does is it maintains its assets. It should be a higher priority to maintain what we have before we build new. And so you'll see when we get to the bubble chart, that indeed is kind of how our CIP lands. And of course, public safety. Pardon me. So again, tonight we are seeking your feedback on the recommended projects. We don't need to arrive at a final product tonight. We've got a couple more chances to look at this, and as Ms. Camacho will explain in our calendar. And before I get started, this is a tremendous amount of work by our departments. Hats off to them, taking it seriously. They're prepared. Of course, they do a phenomenal job on putting this together. They understand that we have to balance our priorities. We can't just simply invest in one area. We have a responsibility to maintain a lot of city assets, and that's what this CIP does. Departments understand that. It is not a territorial thing. Departments really come together and understand the needs of other departments. Also like to thank the budget staff, specifically Kevin DiDomenico, who put hours and days and weeks of work into this. And this was fairly new for him, but he did an exceptional job. Benicia Benson, who, as always, puts these packets together, very easy to navigate. And finally, Lisette Camacho, to my right, who volunteered to step into this and help out with this budget process. Didn't have to do that, but did. So special thanks to her. With that, I'll turn it over to Lisette and let her take the next few slides.
Good afternoon, Mayor, members of the council. Although individual projects would address various performance measures across all city council priorities, this process of presenting and discussing the initial recommended capital improvement program relates most closely to City Council Priority 2.11. Today's presentation, as well as our public-facing budget process, contribute to our goal of transparency in financial reporting and disclosure of information. The development of the city's operating and capital budgets is a public process. We would like to briefly review the upcoming public meeting dates in the budget development process for both operating and capital budgets. Today, we are presenting the initial recommended capital projects for inclusion in the 5-year capital improvement program, as well as the performance measure acceleration models related to capital program. April 18th is the budget review session where the city manager's recommended budget will be presented. This will provide another opportunity to follow up on any CIP issues that may be raised today. If necessary, a budget review session follow-up meeting is scheduled for May 2nd. May 21st is the tentative budget adoption, June 6th is the final budget adoption, and July 27th is the property tax adoption. In coordination with Communication and Marketing Office and Neighborhood Services and Community Engagement Office, we have developed a public outreach plan to provide information to our residents about the city's budget and allow residents to provide us input and feedback during the budget development process. The online budget forum was open from February 6th through March 6th. Residents were provided a theoretical $100 to spend among various programs and services aligned to the 5 council priorities. In addition, we also worked with the Mayor's Youth Advisory Commission, or MAYAC, to complete an online survey to understand the budget priorities of Tempe's youth. We will compile all the results and provide them to City Council as part of the April 18th work study session packet. We also attended the MAYAC Resource Fair as part of the Regional Unity Walk. On February 6th, we held a virtual and public forum. These were recorded and are posted on the budget's website. In addition to the online and public forums, we established a public website that contains resources and information for our residents on all aspects of the operating and capital budgets. And lastly, we inform residents about the upcoming budget meetings and online resources via Tempe Today, press releases, and social media apps. Now I'd like to review the steps taken over the last 5 months in developing the initial recommended 5-year capital improvement program. First, departments have adopted comprehensive asset management programs that enable them to project the ongoing capital needs in order to maintain the city's existing infrastructure, maintain service levels, or accelerate performance measures prioritized by the City Council. The proposed projects from the departments were provided in your packet in the February 22nd work study session, totaling $1.9 billion over the 5 years. At the same time, budget staff determined funding capacities from all available sources, including both pay-as-you-go or cash funding and bond funding. The budget office also met with each of the departments to provide feedback and review their proposed capital projects. And today, we are here to review and receive your input on the initial recommended 5-year capital improvement program. The proposed 5-year capital improvement program totals $1.95 billion. This is an increase of $437 million, or 29%, compared to the current adopted 5-year CIP. This increase is within our statutory debt limits and within our ability to repay the debt. Some of the highlights for the increases are $150 million increase in the enterprise program. This is due to increases in the water infrastructure projects. The special purpose program also increased by $44.6 million, or 42%. This includes projects in the arts and culture and transit funds. And the general purpose program also increased by $73.1 million, or 12%. This includes projects in public safety, general government, and parks, and includes the $32 million proposed funding for affordable housing enhancement program, and also the increases in the historic preservation property projects. And lastly, the transportation program increased by 97%, or $170 million. This includes the PQI acceleration program with proposed funding of $134.6 million. This chart provides an overview of the funding sources for the recommended 5-year CIP. Again, the proposed funding sources total $1.95 billion and includes both cash and bond funding. I'm going to spend a little bit of time in this slide And this chart provides the overview for the 5-year CIP by program. And I will go from the top left down. The parks, as Tom said, continue to have funding for investments in our neighborhood parks. Police and fire, or public safety, we have significant funding and investments in the regional radio interoperability, funding for new police substation in North Tempe, and also funding for the real-time operations center. We also have funding for the rebuild of Fire Station 2, renovation for Fire Station 3, and fire apparatus replacement. For the Arts and Culture program, this program includes funding for asset restoration, which includes repair and replacement of major equipment, and infrastructure updates at the Tempe Center for the Arts, History Museum, and Edna Weil Art Center. Again, the transportation program includes the PQI acceleration, and the transit program does include investments in maintaining the existing asset with limited program expansion. And this is the program that we talked to you about in the presentation for the long-range forecast. In the fall, we'll come back to council and have a discussion about long-term strategies for this fund once we know the outcome of the Proposition 479. The projects in the storm drains program are based on the storm drainage master study. And as you can see, the enterprise program is the largest program, and again includes projects for water and sewer line replacements, water treatment plant maintenance and upgrades. And lastly, the general governmental program includes investments in our existing buildings and IT infrastructure. With that, I'll turn over the presentation to Mr. Dunsing to go over the CIP funding.
All right. Let's talk a little bit about the CIP, and typically funding or paying for our CIP projects really falls in 3 separate categories. We have our enterprise projects. Again, the largest of that is the water and sewer projects, but we also have solid waste, our solid waste fund, and we have our ambulance fund. Enterprise projects are really paid by user fees. As council understands that we send a monthly utility bill, that monthly utility bill is paid. That's how we pay for our water and sewer infrastructure. We also have special revenue funds that have CIP projects. Typically transit, arts and culture, and HERF are the big ones. These funds are legally restricted, so transit fund can only be used for transit projects. Now, we can issue debt in these funds or issue bonds in order to finance our projects, or we can do pay-as-you-go in these funds. But again, these are legally restricted. We cannot pay for non-transit projects with transit funds. And then finally, general governmental, and that's really where most of this discussion takes place. We try to use cash funding if we can first, but also we have our largest funding source, GO bonds of our general governmental. We also have a number of grants that fall in our general governmental. Some of our affordable housing, some of those are grant funded, fall within there. And typically those are things, your parks, your streets, maintaining our municipal assets really all fall within general governmental. Any one of these 3 areas, we can issue bonds and repay our bonds through this, or we can cash fund and what we refer to as pay-as-you-go financing. So let's talk a little bit about the funding alternatives. Typically, it's always nice to get outside funding sources, federal grants. As Lisette talked about, there's a pretty sizable increase this year. One of the reasons that it has increased is we have increased our request for contingency funding. And what that means is, at the end of the day, if approved, that funding would be appropriated, but we could only spend it if we have a funding source. And a perfect example of that are our Office of Sustainability in the Transportation Sustainability Departments is going after federal funding, going after a significant amount of federal funding. Well, unless we have the appropriation, we can't spend that federal funding. So what we've done is we've increased the amount of contingency funding. So it's always a nice way to be able to capitalize on federal funding that's available. Again, I talked about cash. You know, clearly cash funding, we can either use that for pay-as-you-go capital, or we use cash in our funds for operating purposes. So we typically determine what are our operating costs first. Anything left over, we try to identify as pay-as-you-go funding for our CIP projects. And typically when we're able to use cash, we don't have to issue bonds. Although our bond rate is very, very small, south of 4% when we go out and borrow. You know, if we're able to cash finance projects, we obviously have interest savings. And then lastly, where most of the discussions take place are in that lower right hand, the bond category. We do have restrictions. We've got a constitutional limit. And what that means is we can only issue bonds for a certain percentage of our taxable property in Tempe. So we have to look at that, and we have to ensure we're under that limit. We are also subject to voter authorization for our GO bonds. We go out to the voters typically every 4 years, get approval to issue GO bonds. We cannot go beyond what the voters approved for our GO bonds. And I've got a slide on that in just a minute. And clearly we have to have the revenue to repay the debt. In our enterprise and special revenue funds, those are either the transit tax, the highway user revenues, or in the enterprise funds, it's user fees. For the governmental funds, when we issue GO bonds, we repay those GO bonds with secondary property taxes. And again, I've got a slide on the secondary property taxes. But typically what we do in Tempe, we know what our property tax levy is going to be. That drives the amount of bonds we can issue, which drives the amount of CIP projects that we can recommend to council. We can't go beyond that. So really, sort of the limiting factor is the amount of secondary property taxes we're going to get in. And as you know, we have a property tax stabilization policy that we've talked about a time or two in prior work study sessions. I'll talk about it again here in just a minute. So let's talk about the bond authorization election. The last time we went out was November 2020, and for a total of $349 million. The next bond election is scheduled, assuming council approval on the call for election, would be scheduled for November 2024. It has to fall within a general election. And these numbers that you see in under the November 2024 at this point are estimates. The CIP is the source document for us sizing the bond election questions. And at this point, we've seen an increase in the CIP from last year to this year. So we do anticipate that there will be larger questions, and you know, one of the big ones is the additional $32 million that you see for the increase of affordable housing, and also the $134 million, which is included in community safety and roadways for our PQI acceleration that we've talked quite a bit about.
Yes, Councilmember Garland?
Sorry, just a real quick question. So back to that slide. So the suggested bond number for November, if we vote on that to move forward, that's not the final number. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, Mayor, members of the council, it scares me to death to put these numbers up here because it's not final yet. But I can tell you, based on what you're looking at tonight, this is how we would size the questions. Again, we've got a couple more looks at this, so this could change a little bit.
Okay.
I don't anticipate it changing a lot. But
All right, I won't hold you to it then. Just
thank
want to
you.
clear. Thank you.
So let's talk about the limitations. And remember that last limitation was the amount of property tax that we collect. Again, the property tax that we get in determines the amount of bonds we can issue, determines the size of the CIP. So Tempe has adopted a property tax stabilization policy. And basically what that does is any current properties on our roll, the total values of that will not increase more than 3.3%. That's what the stabilization policy does. So we've got a predictable yet slightly increasing property tax levy that we're able to build our CIP around. The second part is what we've talked about at a couple of prior meetings. What staff has proposed to do on the higher priority projects, that's the affordable housing and the PQI acceleration, we're basically stacking that on top of our baseline CIP projects. So we'll have to come back to council with a policy that takes that into consideration, and that's that additional $100 that we've talked about that would be levied on the median household in order to pay for that. So you'll see a little bit different look at our CIP. We'll come back with a proposed property tax stabilization policy, but it's just to be able to accommodate those additional programs. Talk a little bit about inflationary impacts. Over the past several years, we've seen significant inflationary increases. We were able to basically hedge some of that with some pay-as-you-go funding. I can tell you it's not enough. So what staff has to do, they have to go back and either change a scope of a project, they can delay the timing, but the inflationary impact on our projects was very, very real, and it's something that we needed to work through. Luckily, we're seeing that come down a little bit. We're still anticipating inflation in this CIP. It's one of those things that we don't like, but it's kind of a reality that we have to deal with, and so we do take that seriously, and that's why you'll see sometimes we come back and say, we need to be, in order to complete this project, we may need to defer something. And a lot of that is the inflationary impact that we frankly didn't anticipate, but it's purely market driven. As Lisette talked about, we maximize our GO bond funding. We know the revenues we're getting in. We know the GO bonds we can issue. We do maximize that to fit within our stabilization policy. I talked about the general fund cash. We're not proposing to pull that back. It's still funding a couple of very important projects that we have. So we are going to recommend we keep that in the projects. And I talked a little bit about how, based on inflation, we may have to scale back or defer projects. Catch up here if I can. I have lots of notes, but I don't always go by my notes. So when we evaluate and bring back projects for council to review and hopefully eventually approve, we really look at it under two lenses. We've got a primary prioritization scoring is what we call it. And again, those are the major things important to our council. That are we addressing public health and safety? Are we preserving what we own before we expand what we own? And then finally, does it fit within council priorities? That's the primary way we look at projects that we bring back to council. We also have secondary prioritization. Are there legal or contractual obligations? Do we have grant funding and different things like that? But primarily, it's public health and safety, asset preservation, and the priority of this mayor and council. So here's our affectionately known bubble chart. Within our packet, you can go through, and the public can go through and find the bubble chart and hover over these, and it'll show you basically the recommended CIP projects that comprise each one of these bubbles. Again, what you're seeing here, these are the governmental GO bond funded. That's where the majority of the discussion occurs. But what you'll see is the majority of our CIP addresses public health and safety and asset preservation, that upper right quadrant of this bubble chart. So we think we hit it. Again, we're absolutely happy to take council feedback on that, but we did hit the prioritization that I talked about in the previous slide. So now I'll finally get to turn it back to Lisette.
Okay. This slide is a summary of the project highlights for the 5-year capital improvement program. We've talked a lot about the pavement preservation, PQR acceleration. Again, there's funding of $134.6 million in that program. We do have funding of $21.4 million for the implementation of downtown improvements or Mill Avenue improvements. There is $7.8 million for electric vehicle charging infrastructure for both city and public vehicles. $30 million for construction of a combined public safety facility and fire medical rescue station number 8 in the ASU Novus corridor. $32 million for the affordable housing to enhancement program, $12.3 million for multiple historic property projects, and almost $33 million for a new police substation and training facility. For the Refresh Tempe, we've moved the program from concept to full implementation. We continue to have regular communication on the overall plan and the projects. We've also deployed signage for the signature projects, and we continue to try to maintain and engage employees. And we ensure that the project map is updated with the most recent and up-to-date information. I do want to highlight some projects that have been completed. The right-of-way landscaping on Rio Salado Parkway and 5th Street are completed. Residential street pavement projects at Optimus Park area and various neighborhoods at Kyrene Road to Rural Road have been completed. The Clark Park pool amenities almost complete. We have the grand opening in April. The water line replacement in North Tempe is also complete. Fire medical rescue station number 2 is still under construction. And the bus stop capital improvements, the first 4 locations, the construction have been completed. And also the municipal arts program, the Mill Avenue underpass, public art. The construction is expected to begin in the fall of 2024. Like in previous years, the fiscal year 25 through 29 adopted CIP will be incorporated in the Refresh Tempe program. And with that, I'll turn over the presentation to Ms. Wydell Holmes. She'll now discuss the CIP projects that relate to the performance measures for which the City Council requested accelerated models.
Thanks, Tom. Good evening, Mayor and Councilor. Wydell Holmes with the Strategic Management Innovation Office. Like Lisette said, I'm here to share with you some of the key strategies that staff have created around the 5 acceleration models that were identified in last November's work study session from the infamous START tool, which starts our performance-led budgeting process. On your screen you have, or in your packet, wrong one, sorry. Okay, there's 2 mouse up here. It's going away. You have the top 5 acceleration models that you identified from our over 100 performance measures. The acceleration models that have asterisks are actually returning performance measures that were in last year's or this current year's fiscal year prioritization and acceleration approach. And then new to this year is our property code enforcement performance measure. So I wanted to also share that staff were very intentional and thoughtful about creating strategies that honored where we are in regards to our operating budget as alongside where we want to be with our CIP budget. And so we know that there's a dynamic between those 2 budgets. So tonight, I will be presenting all of the acceleration models. Unlike years past when we had 15, we saved some time and split them up between the 2 work study sessions in March and April. But tonight, I'll be including all of these. But in April, we will come back with a status check-in on the acceleration models that you had adopted for this current year as well. So with that, I'll proceed and also just thank staff and the performance measure leaders, their strategy partners, as well as the directors who act as champions for all of these performance measures. I'd also like to call out Mary Mazey. She's our strategic initiatives manager, and she runs our Tempe Accelerated Performance Team, TAP. And this is where we have that behavioral aspect coming in regards to making commitments, following through, accountability, and really having time-bound action around the performance measures. So our first performance measure is our pavement quality index. And as you'll see, there's quite a bit here, including the potential bond that Lizette and Tom talked about earlier. I want to let you know that when the staff decide and make decisions about PQI, they do it from objective criteria. And it's all based on the condition of the street, as well as the intention to maintain what we have and improve what's falling behind. And so with our 40% of our network is below good condition. So staff have had a strategy around the arterial streets, basically trying to move the collector streets from 64 to 65. This would include projects such as Baseline Road between I-10 and Mill Avenue, as well as Hardy Drive between Guadalupe and Southern. One of the key things I'd like to point out, though, is the focus on residential areas. As you know, in our last community survey, as well as in our business survey, PQI was one of the top priorities from our community members. And so the work in the residential areas is really what's going to move the needle. And an example of that project is by moving the PQI from 39 to 95 in the Victory Acres neighborhood, as well as another example, Warner Ranch neighborhood, moving the PQI from 31 to 95. We can do all of this, and then in addition to the bond program, we will actually be able to achieve our target of 82 within 4 years, instead of a projected over 7 years that we would have in regards to if we kept at the pace we are going. So very excited about the work that staff has done with that. Some of the pre-work has also been in anticipation of the bond, working with contractors such as SRP, other utilities, other private development to leverage and plan projects around where we're not kind of that work smart, don't have to repeat the work. And so staff have already begun strategizing with contractors on those scheduling. So I'll move to ending homelessness, which was the second item in your prioritization of the START tool. I'm having a little detail here. So again, this ending homelessness is an interdepartmental collective strategy. It is housed and championed by our Community Health and Human Services team. And the focus here is on really increasing not only the engagements, but the result of engagements with those experiencing homelessness. As you know, in January, the team shared with Council a 30% reduction in both unduplicated Tempeans served, as well as almost a 40% reduction in the chronically homeless individuals that we have in our community. And so, again, focusing on graduation from our Tempe Works program, the engagements that would result in housing, as well as addressing ongoing encampments, and then also increasing our non-shelter capacity. The plan here with the almost $10.8 million is to almost double our current non-congregate shelter capacity. And then, of course, important, smaller a little bit amount for CIP is $52 million or so related to shelter plumbing. And again, with the bond, it would be able to have us negotiate for purchase of property to increase affordable housing for those who are most vulnerable in our community, such as older adults on fixed incomes, families with children, or those with disabilities. Did I switch around here? I skipped, sorry. Now I'm going to move to a couple things here. Feeling of safety in your neighborhood. And key to this is, again, interdepartmental collaboration that the police department works with across all of our departments, especially having our beat officers with our neighborhood associations and our homeowners associations meetings, having that presence in the community. Key to that collaboration also is implementing the real-time operations center that would support our public safety response, as well as looking at crime trends and being focused on what we're reducing. The other thing in related to crime-free multi-housing is to increase the certification and the participants in that program, as well as maximizing our community responders and the resource that Council has provided for that in regards to reducing or increasing their call capability by 5%. And so we're really excited about that interdepartmental collaboration. It takes not just one solution, but multiple solutions. And then finally, the fifth performance measure that was identified for acceleration is our employee turnover. And with that particular measure, as you know, we do have an ongoing comp and classification study with the plans to plan for implementation in the spring of 2025. But in addition to class and compensation, it's also important to make sure that we have a robust onboarding system of our new employees, as well as the dynamics and relationship that employees have with their supervisors. So increasing the teams that are participating in our IQIP program, which is program to support not only communication between employees and supervisors, but communication and overall direction of training, development, workload, things like that. And then also, one thing that does set Tempe apart and differentiates us from other cities is a very robust educational partnership program where our employees can avoid out-of-pocket costs for their education. And this includes not only academic certifications and degrees, but also vocational, such as in water operations management, paramedic training, as well as HVAC and electrical training. So very happy to report that that program continues to expand and grow. And with that, again, I'd like to thank the teams in regards to how they've put together strategies to really support advancements of these measures. And then just as a reminder, we'll be back in April with a check-in on our 23-24 acceleration models and continuing to plan for the next year. Thank you.
So Mayor and Council, be happy to take any feedback. I understand and apologize that there's a tremendous amount of information in your packet. 20-some slides does not do it justice. These are just the very, very high-level highlights, but staff is here. If you have questions, again, we'll be back to discuss CIP, and we'll also kind of evolve into our operating budget request. So for any questions.
Sounds good. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Lisette. Thank you, Waddell, as well. Just want to note to Vice Mayor Adams and Councilmember Devar are on the line, so they're here virtually, just for the audience watching at home and sitting in the audience as well. Council, any comments or questions on anything you heard this evening? Councilmember Garland?
After that long presentation, somebody has to, I don't know. Okay, I just want to say the bubble chart, the little bubble things, that's really cool. I did like that a lot, to be able to hover over there and see what the projects are, all of them. And so as it was kind of a question, is that going to live anywhere on one of our website pages somewhere that people can go on there and find it? Because I think as the projects go on, it would be great if somebody said, gosh, the CIP, I have questions about it, and you could go back to that. Is there any place that can live?
Mayor, members of the council, it's in our packet, and it will now be on our website. That's a great suggestion. Thank you.
I love it. And the other one, we have the Refresh Tempe. Thank you, Lizette, thank you for reading the list of the things that have already been accomplished, because I know that people ask us that all the time. And some of the projects, I drive home on Rural Road, holy smokes, the medians in the center look amazing. So our staff, everybody's doing a great job with that. But it's nice to be able to see that. So there is a location on our website that you can go onto the dashboard, and you can click on all the projects and see when it's done or if it has been done. So thank you so much for reading that for us. Yes, the packet was really large, Tom, and I just don't know what to tell you about that, but it was great information. I really appreciate it, and thank you for breaking it down for us.
Thank you.
Sounds good. Thank you so much. Councilmember Chin?
Thank you, Mayor. One question and clarification, because I know I will be asked this question. You might as well bring Craig up for it.
And here he comes. Craig
Come
Hayden,
on
ladies and gentlemen.
down.
You're the next contestant.
What is the timeline and location of the expansion of pickleball courts?
Thank you, Councilmember Chin. Mayor and Council, Craig Hayden, Community Services Director. We have identified Tempe Sports Complex. We originally designed 5 years ago for an additional 8 courts when we installed the 8. So we've currently got in the capital program the design in year 1, construction in year 3. What we'd anticipate happening going through design during this process next year, identifying where it's at so that we can potentially move funding up to the second year. If need be, it'll be the new single year. And then just a kudos to the team. We've shifted from 100% asset management for the non-contractually obligated funds to now an 85-15 where we're adding 15% new projects and expanding our system, this being a key one, along with dog parks within our city. So, thank you.
Sounds good. Thank you. Councilmember Hodge?
Sorry. Mine is just a follow-up to her question is it going to be any by any of the schools in the parks by the schools? Pickleball.
So we currently have, Councilmember Hodge, we have pickleball courts over at Mary Moses Green, which is right next to a Tempe school. On the south side of town, we have 4 pickleball drop-in courts. that
I
we have
know, but what
over
about the northern schools?
On the north side, we currently have Indian Bend, and we would want to move forward with identifying additional courts as we move forward. One of the goals here is to establish and implement the recommendations from the Parks and Rec Master Plan level of service as we look at increasing our amenities. So that would be a key consideration.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, any other comments or questions from council? All right, seeing none. Tom, Lissette, anything else?
Members of council, no, we thank you and thank you for your patience and again, appreciation for our city manager's leadership through this process and especially our departments and staff. A lot of very, very thoughtful work. So thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. All right, the next item on the agenda is called to the audience for committee of the whole items, but there are not any items ready for city council direction or status update this evening, so I will close that portion of the agenda, and I will move on to item 5B, council committees in progress updates as needed. Are there any updates on items 5B1, 5B2, or 5B3? All right, seeing none, that moves us to number 6, future agenda items. Members of the City Council may request that an agenda item be added to a future issue review session, but in accordance with the Arizona Open Meeting Law, there should be no discussion on the item other than to clarify the request. Do council members have any future agenda items? All right, hearing none, let's go to item number 7, announcements from the mayor and or city manager. Just a very quick note, just welcoming Eric Anderson, our new city attorney, to his first meeting. So just wanted to welcome you up here. And that's all I have, Madam City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a welcome also to Eric Anderson joining the City of Tempe team. We're very excited to have him.
Great.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much. That moves us to item number 8, which is adjournment. The next regular scheduled work study session is going to be on April 18th, 2024, and we are adjourned at 4:52 p.m. Thank you, everyone.